founder or an entrepreneur. You want to take your company value to 300 million, we gon' show you how to do it. Well, we got the roadmap, the aspirations. We'll give you a game plan and strategies. Seize control of your company's destiny today by tuning in to Private Capital Mastery. Yeah. Let's start the show.
Welcome back to the Private Capital Mastery Podcast and community. I'm your host, Brian Franco, and today we are going to talk about exit strategy success and how leveraging fractional COOs will contribute to the success and the size and scale of your exit. I'm joined today with a very special guest, Parham Mirshahpanah. He and I met earlier this year, and I've had some great conversations with him in and around his work that he does at 334 Ventures. And pleased to have you here, Parham. Thank you for being on. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian. Great to be here and great to join you on your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in our podcast, the Private Capital Mastery, this is what we're talking about, right? What are the private capital markets? How does one interact with them? How do they leverage them to grow and scale and ultimately exit their business? And what I loved about the work that you do is that, as we talked before too, you are coming in at a time that is required and requires a different level of thinking to get the company from, let's say, a seed or a concept, to critical mass and to size and scale, so that those capital investors and partners out there in the world sees the opportunity and wants to make those investments, which ultimately leads to some sort of liquidity or exit for those companies. So, with that said, tell us a little bit about your background, your firm, and where do you spend your time in terms of industry, size of companies, things as such.
Right. So as a fractional COO, really what I'm trying to do is to help business owners increase the value of their business so they can prepare to sell. Like you said, it kind of, you go from one mindset to another as you're going through that process. And the two things that I really focus on as a fractional COO is finance and operations. So, I think, finance kind of has, it fits under CFO or COO, but, you can really kind of look at it from either lens. And really, the way I look at it is your business, the value you can get for your business is dependent on the market. It's much like a house, right? Like if you have a house and you have a lot of bidders on that house, the price of that house is going to go up. If you have a business and you have a lot of bidders for that business, the value of that business is going to go up. So then it's a matter of what are business buyers looking for to drive up value. And so that's kind of where I focus is, how do you increase that value in the eye of the buyer? And so, for me, that's really around two things that people are looking for: cash flow and risk profile. So cash flow is pretty straightforward. I think, you talk about this a lot, where people are looking at, EBITDA multiples, customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, et cetera. But I think a lot of small businesses don't have very good quality of financials. So it's hard for a buyer to come in and actually look at those financials and make any sense of them. So I think that's one big chunk of the work I do, is helping small businesses get their financials in order. And then the other part of it is the de-risking of the business. So I'm a new buyer, right? I'm going to come into your business, and how do I know that I'm going to be able to repeat the results that you've generated? I need some sort of playbook. I need some sort of documentation, process, KPI. Like, what am I, how am I running this thing? And so those are the two big pieces that I like to focus on.
I love that focus because we talk about this a lot. The perceptions of risk that buyers and investors are going to have in the marketplace end up ultimately reducing the enterprise value of the company and really create or force them to create structure or deal terms around the transaction that are not necessarily favorable to our clients on the south side of the table, right? So for you to come in and have that end in mind, and really building the business in a way that it's going to be received to the market is low risk, right?
Right.
There's some level of continuity. Obviously, the higher the conviction that the continuity of the business will be there, but ultimately, to your point, that's going to be by way of measurements. And
Right.
these measurements are not necessarily the same measurements that operators and business owners are making in their companies when, as compared to those measurements that you and I are going to focus on an exit strategy or an exit plan, right?
Right.
So that resonates with me. I know it's going to resonate with the listeners because this is what we're really helping them understand, and keep in mind, some are further along in their journey, but there are some that are just listening to this for the first time and they're saying, well, wait a minute, you don't just want to know what my net income is. And,
Right.
and of course, yes. Right. But in some businesses, we're going to look at that on a cash basis. Some businesses will look at that on an accrual method. It just, there's reasons to choose those methods, and you have to know how that's going to be received in order to then prepare the business in that format when we go to market. So that's fantastic.
And I think just one thing to add to that is, not only is this, I think, really helpful for a business that's trying to increase their enterprise value for that sale event, but also, even if you don't necessarily have a sale event in mind, in the next 6 months or year, taking these steps now will just enable you to have a better business in and of itself. So that'll free you up to do the things you want to do instead of doing the things you have to do, right? So you can focus on more growth. You can focus on more product innovation or service innovation, or you just have more time, right? You have this business humming along, and you can let it organically grow, and you don't have to be putting out fires every day. So I think it's, it helps in both ways, whether you want to sell it today or, we want to sell it in 5 years. Doing these things are just kind of basic practices that are really helpful and effective for small businesses.
So what I say in the common denominator there is you need to work yourself out of a job, right? Because
100%,
whether you're selling it, whether you're going to refocus your time and energy on another portion or aspect of the business, or there are those unfortunate situations where we're taken out of the business by natural causes, right? And so I've distilled it down to, we're all going to exit our business. It's just, how are we going to exit? Is it going to be through a strategy? It could be an internal sale. It could be an external sale. It could continue on in perpetuity and be a legacy play. But to be a legacy play, we have to face the fact that even myself, I'm going to get to an age where I'm not going to speak as fast as I am today. I'm not going to think as fast as I am today. And so then what, right? So, but you're exactly right.
So I think that's the exciting part about working with these small businesses too, is seeing those improvements and those tangible results. It just feels good. It feels like you've built this business, and now you're sort of taking a step back and taking a different look at it and seeing it mature and seeing it grow. It really feels like an accomplishment.
Yeah. So I love case studies, right? So what are some of the operational challenges that you see as you're working with clients, and whether they're early stage or mature businesses? What are some of those challenges that they're facing, and how do you, as a fractional COO, address those?
I think one thing I see, I've seen multiple times, and I've been guilty of this too, when I've started my own companies, is the company is very tied to the individual rather than systems. So that means that you have, as you're starting up or as you're early stage, you have a bunch of superstars, right? You're superstar number one. You started the company, you hired another superstar that somehow manages all of your customer service and product and everything. You have another superstar you brought on. So you keep getting these superstars, and in the beginning, sure, that's a great way to grow. You need to be sort of fluid. You need to be dynamic. You can't set things in stone because it's too early to know what that path is. But as you start maturing a bit and you start getting some repeatable things that are going on, whether that's a sales process or a hiring process, you want to start building some structure around that, because you can't keep hiring superstars. It's just not sustainable. You know, we all want A players, that's fine, but you're going to burn people out if you keep building a system that is reliant on people just figuring stuff out all the time. So I think that's one thing I see that's really critical is shifting from relying on individuals to relying on systems. Because what happens then is once you have that system, you start identifying things where you're like, all right, well, I've got this rock star. This guy's spending, you know, he or she is spending their time on something that is so low value. You know, it makes no sense. They don't like it. It's not really adding that much value to the firm. By building a system or process around it, I can now hire that out, whether it's someone who's kind of like, you know, lower level, earlier stage, or even offshore, automate, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yes.
You start freeing people's time up to actually do the things that they're best at. You know, operating at the top of their license was a phrase that someone told me the other day. You know, and I think that's really important. And, you know, I think to your point, it's working them out of a job, right? It's working them out of that specific job that needed to get done at the time. It got done. Great. Now we know how to do it. Great. Let's get rid of that job, you know, automate it, delegate it. Let's level that person up to do the next thing that's important for the business. So I think that's something that I see a lot. And that, you know, as a fractional COO, that's where I can help significantly, because coming into a business that, you know, I'm not a part of gives me a different perspective on things. I look at it as a unbiased third party, you know, objective view. And I don't have any ties to the history of how this process was created. I don't have any ties to the politics of how this process is getting done. I look at it objectively. I say, okay, well, if this is your objective and this is, you know, the steps to get there, great. Here's how we can optimize it and you know, get you to that next level.
Yeah, and what we need to understand with your approach is that not only are you improving and strengthening the business from a systematic approach, ultimately resulting in a better and higher valuation, right? But you have to remember, and everyone has to remember to what you're talking about here, and that is the individual as well. They need to be given a vehicle in which they can grow and evolve within the organization. And so, I mean, let's face it, we're all humans. We get, you know, bored of those redundant tasks. We want those challenges, especially your A players. I mean, they're not going to be A players doing the same thing, you know, for decades, right? They too want to evolve. And that's how a company grows organically. In the fact that you're going in there, you're making the assessments, you're asking the questions, and you're systematizing processes, automating where you can. I mean, that's what it takes to be and become, you know, that next level version of the company that everyone is aiming for, but not everyone can get there. And, but, you know, what I also like about your approach is that you talked about politics, right? And, you know, we all have egos. I have an ego. We don't like change as humans. So, you know, this is going to require some level of change, but if you're getting everyone to understand what you're building in terms of systems and showing them, you know, exactly how this is going to improve their life and lifestyle, right? Because we're all seeking work-life balance, right? This is extremely important for people to understand that this goes just beyond enterprise value. This goes beyond exit, right? This is what everyone should be focusing on when it comes to growth of their companies. And you're doing exactly that. That right there is why I've always, you know, in our conversations and us meeting, that always resonated with me, because this is the word that I want to get out to operate, you know, founders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs out there, because, you know, they, at some point, sometime, they're going to need someone like you in their corner.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. I think what you're kind of touching on is that company culture that you're building, right? Building just a great organization. You know, who doesn't want to be part of a great organization? And it start, you know, and as boring as it sounds to me, it starts with systems and process. Create a great organization where people can thrive. And you know, an example of this was we had a company that I built in the food service business, where we had one of our employees who started out, you know, entry stage, kind of like lowest paid position in the company. And because we had set up so many systems in place and we kept leveling her up, she basically became the entire manager of the operation over the course of like 2.5 years. Because we just kept giving her more and more and more. She kept, excelling at doing everything. And we said, great, like, let's keep giving her more and more and more. And, you have good people on your team. You have 8 players, to your point. They don't want to be stuck in the same thing day in and day out. They want to have a trajectory. They want to have some sort of development plan. So it becomes really important to give that to them. And by building the systems and process, you're building like an organization where you're not afraid of losing that person from that position, because you know that I have a system, I have a process. If I have to hire somebody new, I can hire them, I can train them, and they'll do a great job, right?
Mm-hmm.
That creates the freedom for that person in that role, if they're excelling, to accelerate to the next role, right? And the next and the next. So, and eventually, to be frank, that person left our company because we ran out of progress to provide her, and we were happy.
Yes.
We
Yes.
wanted her to do well. We said, great, like, go on and do this great thing. We can't provide it, but we're so thrilled that you have gone to this level. And, by the way, we have someone else that we've been grooming on this succession planning to take over your position. So, that to me, it felt really good. It just felt really good to be able to do something like that, to offer her that upward mobility. And also just have then not be freaking out that, what happens if this person leaves? It's like, it's fine. This person, we know what we're doing.
Yeah, because you have a system at that point. You're not teaching the individual another individual's job as much as you're teaching them the system, right, that they have to follow.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting case that you brought up, because it seems that the theme that we're talking about is when A players aren't challenged or able to grow or able to evolve, is when I think they become bored. I mean, I can tell you personally in my journey, I mean, this is why I founded this firm, Meritage Partners, in 2005, because I had a vision and I wanted to pursue it. And I didn't feel like I was challenged enough where I was at. But to keep A players, you have to allow them those challenges, right? Because if not, we grow stagnant, we grow content. And, personally in my life, when I've been content, oh gosh, I mean, I become the least motivated I've ever been.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly, talking about, not having sort of that, the challenge or the opportunities. That's exactly, so I spent my first 10 years of my career in a corporate setting. And, I learned a lot. I worked in a German pharmaceutical organization. So it was just process to the nth degree. And that's where I, attribute a lot of my sort of learning and knowledge to. But also, I was at a point where I looked at my next level of leadership, and they were 20 years my senior and just doing the same boring stuff. And I said, this can't be me. So, that's when I decided to leave and go out on my own.
I'm glad you came to that realization, and it's not surprising just knowing what I know about you, and here you are, years later. You certainly absorbed what you did at that time, and part of what you learned is you don't want to be what you saw 20 years down the road.
Right.
So that speaks a lot to who you are as an individual. But when you think about these key operational processes that you've been so intimately involved with at various capacities within organizations, consulting at companies, what are the highlights? What are those key processes that need to be addressed by a company that's seeking a successful exit?
Yeah, I think that there's so many, and I think it's very dependent on the business. I think each business will be different, but if you boil it down, really, I think it's setting really clear goals. I think that's step one. You got to have clear goals. You got to know where you're going. What's your North Star? For a lot of companies, this is setting a budget. It could be as simple as that, right? Here's what our budget is for the year. And then from there, you can actually trickle down every other metric and objective you need to achieve to get there. We can get into more details there. But having a clear goal, I think that's really important as a business leader, owner, but also then communicating that to your team of like, okay, here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. the second piece of that then is, okay, well, that's our goal. So what am I supposed to do? Right. So roles and responsibilities. Everyone needs to know what they're responsible for, what their role is, how are they contributing to that goal. You know, a term that, you know, I'm in the Bay Area, and, you know, I kind of feel like I'm in a bubble. So, you know, if I use any abbreviations that aren't familiar, let me know. But like, we use a term called OKRs, right? Like objectives and key results,
Okay.
or, you know, goal setting, whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
you set these OKRs, and these are the things that are meant to connect in a very hierarchical manner. Like, okay, the budget is this. That means we need to, you know, hit these sales targets. That means we need to hit this many, like, top of funnel, et cetera, et cetera. It's all connected. So you build these roles and responsibilities. They're based on these OKRs. And by doing that, what that enables you to do is then have clear KPIs. So here's my role. Okay, great. I know what I'm supposed to do. How am I being measured? How do I know if I'm doing a good job or not? Well, here's your KPIs we're going to measure against, right? You set up those KPIs. Now you know what you're measuring. And then sort of the catch-all at the very end of it is building a dashboard, a management dashboard, so that, you know, as an owner, I don't have to go and check in with Brian and check in with Parham and check in with Susie. You know, what's going on? Like, of course, you have those one-on-ones, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to see everything sort of in one place and have a management dashboard that enables you to pinpoint issues that are happening. So it's like, okay, well, you know, this part of the funnel is looking good. Part 2 of the funnel is looking good. Looks like we have a disconnect in this third part of the funnel. Let's go focus there and figure out what's happening instead of trying to boil the ocean, you know, and upheave everything.
Exactly. You know, but these key takeaways, you know, also, you know, for a smaller company or mid-sized company looking for a successful exit, also apply, you know, to venture capital groups or specifically private equity groups that, let's say, they make an investment into a smaller company, they grow and scale it to a certain size and critical mass. But, you know, these equity groups, they typically have to be in and out of the investment within, you know, 3 to 7 years or somewhere in between.
Right.
And you also work with equity groups and helping them become exit ready. Do you find it's much different, you know, in terms of how you advise a small business versus a portfolio company owned by a PE firm, or is it the same?
It's different. I think, you know, you focus on a lot of similar things, but I think it's different in a way that with the smaller companies, I think you have a bit more, I don't know, latitude or freedom to kind of explore, like, hey, what should we focus on? Where's your, it's more, I guess it's more driven by the business owner, you know, and kind of
less rigid, would you say?
I don't know if it's less rigid. It's just the way it's the portfolio company has like a very clear trajectory, right? It's like, all right, we need to get from point A to point B as fast as possible, right? Or like as efficiently as possible. Whereas the small business owner, I think, has a little bit more leeway. So I guess, yeah, in a way it is more rigid, a portfolio company. You know, so I think that's the main difference. And, you know, but at the end of the day, you're still working on the same things. You just have a little bit more focus, I think, and much faster focus. I think the small business needs a little bit more discovery work in the beginning to understand what's going on and where you is.
You could almost relate it to like an adolescent human where they're more exploratory, not too sure about life, right? And then as you grow older and wiser, you're very specific, you're very intentional with your time and your energy because you don't have as much time and energy.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
And so I think that's a good way to illustrate it based on what you're describing. But, you know, both are examples of sets of growing pains that can be felt by those leaders and employees in the company. And but
I was going to say one of the examples of that I recently came across was a CPG company that, you know, is venture backed, and they, you know, they're looking to grow. They were looking to deploy capital, and they couldn't really, they kept kind of messing up their calculation on, you know, how much money they needed, you know, for what time frame. And so, you know, as they were going into their next fundraising round, you know, I was helping them take a look at their financials, and, you know, we realized that they were misallocating production labor into overhead instead of costs. And so their gross margin was, being overvalued. And so they thought their unit economics were better than they actually were. So then we kind of looked at all their financials. We basically took like the last 3 years of financials. We did some, spreadsheet, wizardry.
Analysis.
And we converted it and remapped it. And we're like, okay, here's your actual unit economics. Here's your, gross margin. So then this is what we need to raise in order to get to that next level. Those are some of the things where I think in that PE backed or VC backed firm, I think it's very financially driven. And so that's where a lot of that focus is really just like digging in and understanding the finances and making sure that your finances are, categorized the right way, you're doing your bookkeeping correctly, and it's driving the right decisions in terms of finance and capital raise.
Yeah. Well, I want to come, this is important. And I want to come to some closing points here because, when you're parachuted into a company to do the work that you do as a fractional COO, it's, we have to remember that you're doing your best to implement these systems, but a company is always evolving, right? And in that evolution, and you personally want to ensure a smooth transition, right?
Right.
So how does, when your job is done, or maybe it's never done, but how does that look when you're transitioning from you as a fractional consultant advisor to a full-time COO within the organization?
Yeah. I actually think it's pretty simple for this role specifically because the inherent role of a COO, whether fraction or full-time, is to build systems and process so that you can work yourself out of a job, right? As you alluded to earlier. So my job is to work myself out of a job, just like
I like that.
So it's like, I think it's pretty smooth because you are building the systems, you're taking a focused approach to building systems and structure. So you're really focused on the most critical things first, right? You're not coming in and figuring out how to optimize some little detail that doesn't matter that much, right? You're coming in and you're focusing on the things that are most critical, the kind of critical pathway in the organization. So as you're fixing, structuring those things, systematizing those things, when the company's ready to bring in a full-time COO, that's great, right? Because that person's coming in and they're looking at the system like, great, you've already kind of solved really major issues. That means I can now focus on, the next level of growth. Where do we want to get to instead of having to work backwards, and fixing all the operational debt that the company has acquired.
That's right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And then too, as the company evolves and grows or brings on new capital partners or later stage capital partners, there's certainly transitions there and they need to happen. Just depending on what the next steps are, or what's the direction at that point. Because as we talked throughout, this podcast, is that focus changes as the company's needs change, and you're there to ensure that evolution is occurring by way of coming in and assessing and provoking thought and setting up systems and getting everyone's buy-in from a cultural standpoint to really participate. But no one's really going to participate unless they subscribe to what you're doing. But the subscription to these systems really is more impactful when those people on the team have that input into what those systems could or should be.
Absolutely.
And I can see exactly what you're saying, how that's different for you coming in as an outside party versus someone who's already internally, already living in that environment, because it's hard to see. It's hard to see from what they say inside the label, right? It's really hard to see that. But well, this is good. I always love to leave this kind of on kind of exciting point, or a point where you've had a success story recently, or you have a success story in the making. But share something with the listeners in terms of what you've worked on or working on that's leading to this exit strategy that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I think one really exciting thing that I think is coming up, and it kind of feels like a buzzword, but again, I'm in the Bay Area here, but we've all heard of AI, right? AI is coming for everything, and so one area that's exciting for me is that when I look at what AI is doing to businesses, you kind of have the big players, right, that are, the huge, conglomerates are all implementing AI into their, customer service or supply chain management, whatever. And you have sort of the smaller tech companies that are doing it, right, because that's just inherent in what they do. But then you have all these small and medium businesses in the middle that kind of don't know what to do about AI.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting to me because as I look at this next stage for this fractional COO model, this is an opportunity to bring AI to those small businesses because it's really still about workflow and process, right? And at the end of the day, you need someone with a systematic mind come in, work with your team, get buy-in, do all those things that you need to do. But then instead of implementing some solutions that might just be like, okay, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you now can implement an AI solution because AI can do step 1 through 1,000,000 much faster than anyone could. I think that's really exciting, and that's one area that I'm looking into is, how do we identify opportunities to bring AI? Because there's so many solutions. We don't need to build more AI solutions. We need to learn how to implement AI solutions. So that's kind of where I'm really excited about is to bring that into the small business realm.
Yeah, and I would sum that up as implementation and integration of that existing technology.
Right.
Because let's face it. There's still technology that was introduced, a decade ago that we're still, maybe at 50-60% utilization because we haven't fully implemented those. We want to, we intend to, but the beauty is that's what you're here for. And I appreciate you spending the time with us and talking about how, these exit strategy successes can be leveraged using a COO, fractional COO like you and your firm. I certainly encourage anyone that's in or on this journey and is looking for this sort of resource. Parham is an excellent gentleman, great experience, thought-provoking concepts and ideas that I think can really, from where I'm sitting, help even our clients be exit ready and prepared to when we are getting ready to go to market. Because the last thing we want to do is structure some sort of terms around an owner that's so stuck in the business or the systems that they created, but those systems usually mean that they're at the center of that, of everything, right? So, Parham, thank you for spending the time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experiences. I'd love to have you back. I think we can go on and on, as I always say, but let's do it. Let's have you back on. Let's talk about more, unpack more details, and see where it takes us.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it was awesome conversation, and I would love to keep it going.
Okay, fantastic. And thank you for joining this episode of the Private Capital Mastery Podcast and community. Stay tuned for future episodes where we unpack more and demystify more of the private capital markets. I'm your host, Brian Franco, and we'll see you soon.